Okay? So you never let your roles limit you. But it's definitely beneficial to have them catered, roles that is, towards your natural abilities and tendencies as a player. The instructions that you want to give to your teammates as an in-game leader. What it is it's a scale between aggressiveness and passiveness at its very base. Having a passive entry fragger just won't work because entry fragging by its very nature is the dumbest thing someone can do. As Warden has stated, you either have to be really fucking dumb or something's got to be wrong in your head for you to want to continue entry fragging. As an entry fragger, you probably have 20% chance. Time and time again, you need to put yourself in a position where you have like a 50-50 chance, or to go into a contested area where you only have like a 20% chance of winning the aim duel, and you're just hoping at that point that your team will be able to get the trade, and you guys will be able to trade your way into the bomb site. Okay? For some players, that's just not their style. That's not what they want to do. Plus, on rolls, it's also a scale of who's most likely to clutch to who's least likely to clutch. But that's a secondary thing, and you'll see that with a lot of teams, the way their roles are set up are not necessarily congruent with who is most likely to clutch or who's least likely to clutch. But the fucking the extremities are always there. Okay, and by extremities I mean the extremities between entry fragger and lurker. So if Nip, for example, had Freiberg lurk, and they're like, Freiberg, you're a lurker now. Get right. You're the entry fragger. And Get Right would just like go in and die every round. At the start of the round being the first to die almost always. They probably wouldn't have won 87-0. It's the same with any team, really. You put your players in the best positions for the team to succeed as a whole. That's what roles mean. Okay? Because everybody has different duties in this game. And different responsibilities. Sometimes an entry fragger, by the way, can be too aggressive. And you want that aggression sometimes to just go in second. So you're guaranteed to get the trade. This is like a competing theory on Counter-Strike roles. And you have a slightly less aggressive player actually entry fragging in front of him just because that less aggressive player can be a little bit more passive, a little bit more meticulous, but like, no, let's wait for pre-nades. All right, I'm going to check here, going to check here, going to check here, going to check here. This could be a one-way smoke. So they're a little bit... That passiveness comes from wariness, comes from fear of death in Counter-Strike. Entry fraggers are not concerned with dying. They don't give a fuck if they die. They're concerned with killing. People who lurk, people who are passive, people who are support players, ops, they're concerned with death. They are playing not to die. They're not playing to make the other motherfucker die. Okay? That's the difference. But yeah, so that's a different idea. So in terms of roles, personality-wise, ideally, okay, I would say, and people could have different competing ideas about this, you want your entry fragger to be your second most aggressive player. Some teams have their entry fragger be their first most aggressive player. That's fine too. You want your playmaker, in my humble opinion, to be your most aggressive player because then he will always be trading on that entry fragger. Almost, okay? And sometimes if you have your entry fragger be too aggressive, your entry fragger just being too dumb, he's running up, he's just dying, nobody's trading for him, and he's almost useless. Alright? So then when you have your support, your pure support player, you want him to be a switch personality. So people who are switch personalities in this game can actually be really useful. They can be aggro, they can be passive, they have a hybrid persona, depending. Okay? You also want your op to be a switch personality between aggro and passive. And some teams, their ops are a little bit more passive, some teams, their ops are a little bit more aggressive. Alright? So some teams, their support players are a little bit more passive support players, they're more of deep playmakers, deep supports, deep playmakers, and sometimes their support players are a little bit more aggressive support players. Usually it's somebody who's smart and knows what's needed to get the trade or to kind of like just back off and cut their losses. Now you want your lurker to be your least aggressive or most passive player. So that you have your entry fragger here, your playmaker, then your support, then your op, then your lurker, right? So your most or you could have your playmaker be your most, your entry fragger be your second most, your op be your third most aggressive, your support be your fourth most aggressive or second most passive, and then your lurker be your most passive player. Okay, so these tendencies just come out when people are first learning the game. All right, your more aggro players tend to go in for entries, while your more passive players tend to be off somewhere alone, lurking, or behind everyone, just baiting the fuck out of everybody, just being completely fucking useless. Right? You can take any team, open or professional, and probably make an LMS priority list. So this is the second consideration that I was talking about earlier. Your LMS priority list, every team should have it, really. It's very useful to have. And with that, you can have an idea of how aggro or passive you want these players to be. You want your most clutch players, meaning somebody who has the number one priority list in LMSing in certain spots. And I'll explain how it would look like ideally, right? So with this said, huge fucking caveat, every player on your team should be able to clutch. It is such a bonus, like we saw with Freakazoid, where a team can have an entry fragger who is also capable of clutching. If you have an entry fragger who just like, fuck it, I'm gonna lose, man, that can be a problem. So your entry fragger on your team is usually the least likely to clutch. The worst LMS on your team, okay? But he should still be able to clutch. Your playmaker, ideally, would be the second least likely to clutch, second worst LMS. Now, there are exceptions to this. For instance, if you look at NIP, or you look at Envious, their playmaker, by virtue of how much control you want that player to have over the round, tends to be a very good player, Forrest and Shoxy. So they tend to actually be like the second best, or maybe sometimes even the first best clutcher on their team. First best LMS. Or second best, really. Because I would say Get Right's better at LMSing. And I would say Happy's actually better at LMSing. You want your op to be your third likely to clutch, or your third worst LMS, just because of virtue of the fact that chances are they're going to have an op in their hands. Trying to clutch with an op in your hands, it's a mistake a lot of players make. Every time I see it, I facepalm. Just pick up a fucking rifle. If you're in a 1v2 or a 1v3. Your support player, you want this player usually, like ideally, if you had a support player who was a great clutch, that would be awesome. So if your pure support is your second most likely, your second best to clutch, your second best LMS, that's great, because if you were to fucking look at roles on teams and you were to order them on rounds they survive, or how long they survive into the round, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find your entry fragger's going to die first, your second guy's going to die second, your op's going to either die third or fourth, and your lurker's going to be the last to die. Okay, and your support player is going to die third or fourth. So those are pretty tight. Those can be very interchangeable. Okay? The general gist of it's the more important part. Okay? So just by virtue of the game and the way it's played and how you play your op, if he's more of an aggressive op, more of an entry op like JW, or if he's more passive and more of a support op like Smits or Alu, you'll see where they are in the LMS priority list. And you'll see that Alu or Smits are more likely to be around in 2v3's or 2v4's than, say, JW, just because of their passivity as a player and because they're playing support roles. Okay? The op, by the way, IMO, and we can fight about this, I hope this causes a fucking controversy, is not a fucking role. It's a weapon. Okay? And you can have your opper be your entry, like with Fnatic, or you can have him be a support. So some teams have an entry op, right, like Fnatic. And by the way, anyone can entry. Sometimes being an entry basically means there are points in maps which are contested areas. The first point of contention, right? Like Cat, Long Doors, right outside of B-Tons. These are points of contention where if somebody were to run with their knife out to a certain point in the map, that's where the T's and the CT's are going to meet, right? Okay? So if you're with the majority of your team and you're the first one making contact, you're more often than not, more times than not in 30 fucking rounds, or in 15 T-side rounds, you're probably the fucking entry fragger on that team. It's very obvious, but somehow some people, they just fucks up in their heads, right? So sometimes Pronax will entry. Sometimes Crims will entry. And this is all dependent on positioning or timing or utility. Again, you never let your roles limit you. Never are you up in a position where you have to make the entry, or you're there and somebody has a flash out and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not an entry fragger. Can we get an entry fragger in here? Let's all can we call corporate for an entry fragger? Because I'm not an entry, I can't do this, mate. I'm a support player. Have to let this other guy come in front of me. That's not what we are talking about. That's not meaningful, right? Okay, so anybody can entry, right? In that sense. So you'll have exceptions to the rule. What we're talking about are generalities. What we're talking about is ideal situations. We're talking about execute. We're talking about planning stuff and it going to plan. Not just improvising things. So depending on positioning or timing or utility, where it's like I have a flash so I can flash you even though I'm the entry fragger, so Freiberg will flash this person in, or somebody's shot's not hitting, hey man, I can't fucking hit shit. Can I just, you entry. You'll see that happen with Freiberg a lot, actually. He talked about it, where if he's not hitting his shot, him and Exist will switch off, and he'll play the support role, and Exist will entry. Alright? So, whether, there are executes, or it's a creep entry, you're just running in there and trading your way to a bomb site, there are a lot of considerations that can change what's going on and how it's going on, right? And these teams with, like, an entry op. So depending on how you're playing your op, teams like with an entry op, like Fnatic, will have like a fast lurk. It gives so much opening to what you can do. So we'll have a fast lurk like Olaf Meister, he's a fast lurk, aggressively getting map control of areas like Sandwich on Trench. Runs in there, he's in there, and that's why it's so important, whoever your fast lurk is, kind of like with your support, even your playmaker, you have them have that switch personality between aggressiveness and passivity, right? Because they can get into these aggressive situations, and yet they're still concerned with not dying enough, that they're getting into these aggressive positions for map control, and they're still not getting picked. That's like the number one, if your lurker is somebody who's just naturally aggressive, and your lurker is just the first to die every round, and your lurker is just getting picked, he's fucking useless. What's the point of having a lurker if he's just getting picked? You're not supposed to get picked when you throw fakes. You're not supposed to die when you throw fakes. You're not supposed to die when you throw a presence. Why? Because they kill you and then they're like, nothing else is here. The rest of them are there. Let's go kill them. That's not the fucking point, right? Okay, so when you have a fast lurk getting, aggressive map control of areas without dying, and then you have like a slow lurk on the map, like Flusha on Fnatic, working Ivy or Brownhall, someone who's a little bit more passive, a little bit less concerned with killing, a little bit more concerned with not dying, right? Then you can have all this opening up in the map, and you can work so many different wrinkles. You can make presence in areas that open up other areas on the map. This is very basic shit in Counter-Strike. So teams that have support ops, right, can also have this concept of a fast lurker working alone, but acting aggressively to get control of, like, let's say Banana. Somebody getting control of Banana. Woodlogs is not very aggressive, but NBK, for instance, on Infernal, you'll find him there alone most of the time. When they do their mid-app-centric defaults. Or just aggressively getting map control of an area like B-Tons. Sometimes you'll see Forest. He's in B-Tons, in NIP's default. While NIP is centered around Alu, or Alu supporting a 1-2 punch of Exist and Freiberg working up Cat. So you'll see NBK playing the fast lurk on Envious, and this is a team that also does a 1-3-1, but they don't do it with an aggressive op. They do it with a support op, like Smiths, right? So NBK plays the fast lurk role on Envious, holding a position for map control pretty often, right? And this hybrid nature of oppers to be entries like JW or playmakers, like in the case of Kenny S or Guardian. So your playmaker is who you center your team around, really. He's the most important person on your team. He can have the most control over what happens in a round. That's my problem with being a lurker. I don't like lurking because it makes my skin crawl and I feel like I'm not in control of what's actually going on, the actual impact that I could be having in taking over bomb sites, right? Whereas with your playmaker, I call it the playmaker role because they're not in a disadvantaged role like the entry fragger, so they're more likely to survive. They can get the trade and then maybe kill somebody else. They're in an aim duel, or maybe the entry fragger kills somebody, they trade on the second guy, then they take the site. So as a playmaker, your range of control over what's going on in the round is a lot longer than an entry fragger or a lurker. You're in control of what's going on in the round from the early round to the mid round to, if you survive and you're good enough, like Forrest or Shoxy, even the late round, right? And that's something Tarek, for example, could be better at. He's a great early round player, but his mid to late round game really needs work, okay? So that's just playmaking. So you have playmaker, Kenny S and Guardian are the playmakers on their team. Their teams are centered around them. Forrest is the playmaker on Nip. Shox is the playmaker on Envious. Yada, 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 right? This is the second role. This is like the most coveted, going in second. This is the most coveted role in CS. I would say it's the one where you have the most control. It's the one where you can take a site and then you can actually have control over holding a site and you're working post-plant. So, Oppers having hybrid natures, though, of either being, entries like JW, playmakers like Kenny S or Guardian, or support players, like in the case of Alu or Smits, gives them mobility and fluidity for teams to be in a 4-1 default or a 1-3-1 defaulting team. And all this really means is that, you're putting your players in positions on the map that suit them. And you're catering to their natural tendencies of aggression or passivity to help you guys win rounds. And you're catering to their natural abilities of being able to clutch or LMS or aim to help you, or map awareness to help you win rounds. And that's why roles are important in Counter-Strike.